All right, Laura, I'm going to kick it to you. I think it's. What?
Maybe Martin should chair since he's in the room. I'm sorry to put that on you, Martin.
That's fine, then I'm gonna ask what to do. It is 2 o'clock on Monday the 15th.
I screwed that up. 1 o'clock.
1 o'clock on Monday the 15th of November. And I call to order the board workshop on data and progress with learning.
Appreciate it, Martin. Good afternoon to everybody. I really appreciate everybody being here. Excited for today's workshop. Before we get started, though, we're going to do some introductions because we have some different people from learning and teaching in the room that some of you may or may not know. So I'm going to start right over here with Sarah. Sarah, you want to introduce yourself and your title and kind of the work you do within it, because not everybody's going to know some of our titles.
Sure. Sarah Wall, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Professional Learning. And so I help to.
Just a reminder, we have to use mics since we're online and streaming, so you gotta come across the mic so that whoever's watching us can hear.
Sarah Wall, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Professional Learning, and I help to support our curricular alignment efforts, curriculum adoption. I do a lot of work with instructional strategies and planning, and planning trainings for staff.
Mike Lane, Executive Director of Learning and Teaching, so I oversee all of learning and teaching. My partner, Dr. Corey Kalahar, and I support all of our schools. He focuses mainly on elementary, and I focus mainly on secondary schools.
Mark, introduce yourself too. Our staff may not know everybody. I'm sorry. Starting out with MASH.
I did that on purpose. Maria Iniguez, Board Director position 2.
Oh, Martin Barron, Board Director.
Excellent. As Mike mentioned, Corey Kalahar, Assistant Executive Director of Learning and Teaching.
Paul Gordon, Superintendent.
Julie Norton, Board Director.
Amber Burks, I support multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS. That is tier 1 instruction and then the additional tiers of support. In addition, I help out with AVID as the district director, and that's it.
And I'm Michelle Samper. I'm a Board Director for position 4. Thanks.
And we have Laura online.
Laura Jakes, board member.
And then we have Catherine Thomas joining us today. She'll be joining the board next Tuesday. So welcome and thank you for making time to join us. So for today's meeting, we really want to focus on, one of the things that we talk a lot about within the school district is building shared meaning and shared understanding. And we lean into the research of Maris's research from way back in '75 that really talked about one of the best ways to create shared meaning is to have these really rich conversations. So really walking away from a more passive kind of workshop to a very active workshop where we're going to ask our board members to engage in conversations, engage in different dialogue around data, around the article that we sent out and others. So I'm really excited about today's activity. And you know what I'm most excited about? I'm not facilitating today. I am super excited about this. And I'm going to hand it over to Mike Lane, Executive Director of Learning and Teaching, and then he will take it from there.
Awesome. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll jump in to our agenda. I'm going to take us through some outcomes for our time together. We're going to do a welcoming ritual, which I'll explain in just a moment. And then the remainder of our time together will be spent reviewing the learning recovery roadmap. The major component of that, kind of the major focus for today, will be around student data. That's where we'll take a deep dive, but we'll also highlight the other areas of that plan and where we are with that work. At the end, you'll get an opportunity to experience another SEL activity, and Corey will lead us through an optimistic closure activity. So when we do outcomes, we like to separate outcomes into rational outcomes. That's kind of what we want to walk away with, but data needs to be shared between members of the group. But then we also have experiential outcomes about the process we're going to use and the feeling that we're going to walk away from the meeting with. So our rational outcome today is to develop an understanding of current fall student performance data, looking also at multi-year data trends, and then also getting an update on the progress of our learning recovery plan. For the experiential side of things, we would like our school board members to experience the 3 signature SEL practices. And those practices that you're going to learn about today are those ones that help support social and emotional well-being for both students and adults in our schools. And they go above and beyond just simply teaching a lesson on SEL skills or the curriculum. This is things that everybody can incorporate into their daily practice. In addition, we want to strengthen the feeling of partnership between our school board, the learning and teaching team, and our schools. Probably seen this slide before. Actually, it might have been a couple of years since you've seen it, but just a brief reminder, why do we talk about social and emotional well-being in regards to the work we do in schools? Our main focus in schools is educating students. The student outcomes, the meta-analysis on social emotional learning lists the following student outcomes, which you can see, all of which contribute to a higher level of engagement, sense of belonging, and the ability to deeply benefit from the learning that's going on in the schools. But then also those adult outcomes. We want our adults to also strengthen those skills in those areas, because when they are able to have the outcomes that are listed on the slide there, they are better able to come together as highly functional teams to support students along all levels of the continuum. So just a real brief reminder about why we focus on social and emotional well-being. There's 3 signature SEL practices that we talk a lot about. One of them is called welcoming rituals. That's how you open up a classroom or a meeting. The second one is engagement strategies, which we're going to get a chance to take part in. And then the third one, like I mentioned, is optimistic closure. So welcoming rituals are brief. They're interactive experiences that bring everybody's voice into the room and make connections to one another and to the work ahead. A non-school related example of that would be Supreme Court. They have a ritual that they do at the beginning of each of their sessions, as each one greets and shakes hands with each other member of the court. Just kind of that public signifier that while we may have some disagreements and some deeply held beliefs that vary from one another, we are on the same team. We are one group of people supporting this work. There are many routines that we do, whether it's in a classroom or in a meeting, and the routines really speak to the work that needs to be done, right? We have an agenda, we have a note keeper, we have microphones, but rituals are bigger than that. Rituals are about, this is who we are as a team, this is what we believe, this is what we value, and this is how we're going to collaborate going forward. So we are going to take part in a welcoming ritual today, and this is our welcoming ritual. When you reflect on the last 19 months, what is one thing that makes you proud of how our staff, our students, or our families responded to this historic challenge? The way that we're going to do this is we're going to have elbow partners here. We're going to spend 2 minutes, and you're going to kind of buddy up with your elbow partner and just share one thing that you're proud of. At the end of 2 minutes, I'll ask for one board member and one staff member to just share what they share for the entire group. So let's go into 2 minutes. We're going to do elbow partners like this and like this. I'm not sure how we're going to work with Laura at this point, but let's call it. There you go. You can just call it. Yes. Okay, so questions on that? 2 minutes. Go. Partners.
Yeah. What's one thing that you click the last thing? That's go ahead. Yeah, I think this is They'll sign up for that. No, I'm good at going to work. That's what you go to school. That's your, yeah. That's what you're. Force the boldness of truth. After that first.
Okay, small Paul, we back together.
Yeah. That's a great point.
All righty, thank you for your dialogue. What would be ideal is if we could get one school board member to share what they shared, and then we'll switch and ask one of our staff members to share. So any school board members would like to share?
Sure, I'll share.
Well, thank you, Michelle.
So I share from what Amber and I discussed. Is that correct?
Yep.
Okay. So, two things that we discussed were kind of the amazing amount of instructional and technological experiences that the teachers had in the last 19 months, how not only did they have to pivot to different models, but they just had to put a lot more technology under their instructional support, whether it was online or a hybrid model or in person. So just hats off to all our teachers who have, and not just in our district, but of course, wherever there's been school in global society, people had to kind of go away from their traditional ways of teaching and embrace some new, more technological models. So, so that was one thing. And the other thing that came up was the tents that we had for our music students at the high school. It was a really creative, innovative solution. I know it got a lot of press through news and late night talk shows and everything, but I think it was kind of exciting that we were looking at a way of how do we keep students safe and they can still engage in the actual content for that class without having to be online. So I think that was something that stuck out in my minds as well.
Thank you. How about one of our staff members to share, please?
We spoke about the families. I mean, just like our staff, our families had to pivot to doing something they never once signed up for the vast majority of people. From one day going to work to the next day literally being home, and then a week later as we transitioned into online, having to figure out how to do all of this online with their kids at home, and for many still working from home. So just very proud of our families and how they handled this crazy time in our history.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you. This is our learning recovery roadmap, the visual that Diana Hagelin created based on our planning with on web page. This is going to be our guide for the remainder of our time together today. And we're just going to jump right in around student performance data. For that, I'm going to turn it over to Amber and to Sarah.
Here we go.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Okay, so in the spirit of what Mike was talking about, how we opened this up today, we're going to do a fall data review and our goal here is to have a collaborative approach so that we're not just delivering data and then telling you what it says, but that we'll go through several slides. We'll be looking at iReady universal screening data that we give fall, winter, and spring. We'll also be taking a look at some graduation data. Those will be our two big data points. And we're just going to invite you on, we have a handout, two handouts today, but the one titled Board Workshop Fall Data Review. If you would just, as we're going through the slides, take notes, what you notice, what you wonder, and what you want to know. And then we're going to have an opportunity to partner again, like Mike just had us do, and we'll be able to talk together in small groups, and then we'll have that opportunity to share out and have some whole group discussion. And if you do have clarifying questions about what the data means as we go, please feel free to ask those. And then for the more reflective discussion questions, we'll save those for the discussion time. So I'm going to pass it off to Sarah.
So looking up here, you can see that. Looking up here, you can see that this slide shows our iReady math data for the last 3 years. Our students take the iReady diagnostic assessment 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. And as you can see here, we have expanded our student usage of the iReady actually since we began giving the iReady in 2018. So in fall 2018, we began using the iReady at K-5 only. And the purpose of that was to align with our new math curriculum, as well as to provide a universal math assessment that we could give to all of our elementary students. Then in fall 2019, we tested K-5 only as well. And in fall 2020, we expanded to also include K-8 and some subgroups at Wenatchee High School and all Wenatchee, well, West Side students, all West Side students. So that would be right here in fall of math 2020. And then you can see math 2021 for fall 2021, which is now, and we continue testing that same larger group of students. As you can see, these are fall snapshots in time over the last 3 years. In the fall, students are tested on end of year standards that they're expected to learn in that grade level. This means they're assessed on those end of year standards each time they test, whether it's fall, winter, or spring. In the fall of 2020, the test here was given at home because we were in remote learning at that time. And the spring 2020 test then was given at school, which will show you some data on that later. This is just showing you the fall data. This fall, of course, we have our students graph, and that represents them taking the test at school. The reason I'm telling you this is that as a result of the math data in fall of 2020 and the reading data in fall of 2020, we saw inflated scores because students were receiving varying levels of support when taking the test at home. So as I go through some of this data, I will be comparing a lot of the data from fall of 2019 to fall of 2021. Those 2 years, the test was given at school. And we have very strict guidelines for administering the test to make sure the data is valid and reliable. I also want to point out the description of the tiers. We have the green representing tier 1, and that represents students who are at or above grade level performance when they took the test. The yellow represents tier 2, and we would say that those students are approaching grade level. They're about a year behind where we want them to be at this point in time, if they're showing yellow. And then red signifies well below grade level. These students are 2 or more years behind grade level and receiving intensive support so that we can help them catch up. Here you can see a comparison of our Hispanic and non-Hispanic students in math over the past 3 years. Remembering again that we expanded our testing to include more students since we originally began giving the test. In 2019 and 2021, You can see that our number of proficient students in the fall was pretty similar in both years. So we would be looking here at our 6% Hispanic percent proficient there and 25% non-Hispanic, as compared to down here at the bottom, 5% and 25%. You can. This is also a good slide in which you can see that 2020 was definitely an outlier set of data. Much higher numbers there in the fall for both groups of students. Now I'm going to pass it over to Amber to share our special education data.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So this reflects our special education data for math again. And you will see that it is comparing students with IEPs to students without IEPs in math over 2 years. And just, Sarah, thank you for setting the context. Again, 2020 students were tested at home. So across the nation, I already reported out there was an inflation in performance. Let's see here. So we can see that we do have a gap. We recognize that gap between students with IEPs and students without IEPs. And then just that we did not have the special education math reports available to us, and that's why it was not there today. And then I'm also going to share with you the next slide, which compares economically disadvantaged students in the area of math with non-economically disadvantaged students. And remember again, we have expanded our tests, and so we have different students taking this test over time. We do see a decrease from fall of 2020 of proficiency to fall of 2021. Again, we are recognizing that gap and working towards improving that. And the next slide, I'm going to pass off to Sarah.
Okay, this slide shows you last year's math performance and growth from fall to spring. You'll recall that much of the year was spent in remote learning or hybrid learning, depending on the grade band. In the fall, again, students took the test at home. And in the spring, they took the test at school. Even though we consider the fall 2020 data to be inflated due to the testing environment, you can see here that there still was growth that occurred from about 22% proficient in the fall, which again, we believe to be inflated, to 37% in the spring, and the 37%, which we believe is accurate based on students taking the test at school. Moving on to the next slide into reading. In the fall of 2018, we began using the iReady reading assessment to replace our previous universal screener, which was Sybil Next. It's important to note that we do not expect to have many students proficient in the fall, again, because we're testing on end of year standards. In fall of 2020, our percent of students proficient was higher than usual, again, due to the testing environment. However, this year, we can see that we have a larger number of tier 3 students than both of the previous years. So we definitely have our work cut out for us, knowing that we have a higher percentage in the red range up here than both of the previous years. On the right-hand side of the data, you can see the reading strands that are tested right here in these bars. And moving on to the next slide, this is the comparison of our Hispanic and non-Hispanic students in the area of reading over the past 3 years. Again, our fall 2019 and our fall 21 data is similar here for our tier 1 students in both subgroups. We do see a higher number of tier 3 students in this graph as well for this year, as shown right up here with the 53% and the 25%. So that's something that we're very aware of needing to address. I'm going to pass it back to Amber.
Okay, thank you. So this next slide is mirroring what we just did for math. It represents students with IEPs compared to students not on IEPs and their performance in reading over the past, over 2 years' time. And again, we do see a decrease in proficiency from 14% to 6%. And that is an area that we have our eyes on and working towards improving. And in the next slide, this is reading for our economically disadvantaged students compared to our non-economically disadvantaged students over 2 years' time. We see here a decline in proficiency of economically disadvantaged students from 19% to 14% proficient. Again, a focus area. And let's see, and the next slide. This is shows last year's reading performance from fall to spring and the growth. And like math, we did see growth. And again, you can recall that in the fall, students were taking the test at home. In the middle of the year, they were coming back either full-time or hybrid. And we did see that there was a growth that occurred from 32% proficient in the fall to 48% proficient in the spring. Well, that's a celebration. Okay, shifting from K-8 to more 9-12, we'll look at what OSPI's data has for us. This comes from the OSPI report card. And the next 4 slides will be from OSPI. So this slide shows a comparison of graduation rates in 4 years' time by demographics. And you can see the different demographic groups that we're looking at: graduating, percent continuing, and then percent dropout. And we do see here there is a gap in graduation rates between Hispanic students and white students. And we're very much aware of that and working towards closing that gap. So on the next slide, you'll see the same data, but this one is over time. So this is graduation by demographics, percent of students that graduated in 4 years' time. So you will see that we are over time beginning to close that gap between Hispanic students and non-Hispanic students. Next slide. This is 9th grade graders on track to graduate. So this is the percent of students that passed all their courses in 9th grade. And again, you'll see just our different demographic groups listed. And something that's important to know about why OSPI would track 9th graders in passing their courses is that there is a strong correlation between students who receive 2 Fs in their freshman year. That decreases their probability of graduating by 50 percentage points. So it's really significant, and that's why OSPI would track that. It's a very strong indicator for who will graduate. So going to the next slide here. This slide lost my place here. This is 9th graders on track to graduate and then percentage over time. So same data, but just looking at it over time again. And you can see that we are starting to close that gap between white students and Hispanic students. Okay, and now I'm going to pass it off to Sarah to set us up for our next step.
Okay, so in schools, we frequently ask our PLC teams to analyze data using data protocols. So today we have a data protocol specifically planned for all of you and all of us, and we're really excited about it. Here's how it's going to work. A member of learning and teaching will partner with each of you to process today's data that we already discussed. Board members, you will be partner A. Learning and teaching members, you will be partner B. And so we'll have, I guess, about 4 groups of 2-ish or so. And partner A will start the conversation by sharing something you noticed from the data, something you wondered about from the data, or maybe something that you want to know. And while partner A is sharing, partner B will be actively listening. You'll have about 4 minutes for this, and after that, then partner B will do the talking and partner A will do the listening. So Caleb will be in charge of our timer here, and when the timer goes off, then we'll proceed to the second part of the data protocol. So I guess we'll just, I'll partner with Maria and so on all the way around.
You're going to friend? Okay. And that's 4 minutes total, right?
Yes.
For both A and B.
So it's very often there's a lot of but I noticed
I think about this one. Probably.
yes. Absolutely. Do you want me to?
Are we gonna? Hey, Deborah will.
I'll see if I can get.
For us, for the superintendent, we are, we're that.
Okay, time is up, so we are moving on to part 2. Did you wrap up your last sentence, last thought? Okay, so moving into part 2, the next step of our data protocol is to summarize the data. And during this part, partner A will share a trend that you are seeing from the data, and partner B will share an action that WSC is taking regarding that trend. When the timer ends, we will transition into part 3, where we'll have a chance to share out as a whole.
Sorry.
Yeah, whatever works. Yeah, whatever works for her.
Yes.
Yeah, she wants to go back.
She has this.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Okay, so time is up. So you can wrap up your last thought, last sentence. We're going to transition into full group sharing. So what we'd like to know is, would someone be willing to share something you noticed, wondered, a trend, or an action? And we'd like to hear from 3 or 4 people.
What I wondered is with the 9th graders on track to graduate. So starting in 2017 through 19, the gap was, pretty this about the same. And then in 2020, that gap decreased. How much of it was the change of grading because of COVID? So was it a real decrease in that gap? Or is it a COVID decrease in gap, and we're going to see the 2021 data, the gap become wider?
Good wonder.
We'll find out
I think
soon.
I have a guess.
Okay, so if someone else want to share a noticing, a wondering, a trend, or an action?
I'd kind of like to say something on trends. I don't think we've got comparables to see trends here because you've had a step function disruption through the pandemic and got different populations. So, but rather than abandon ship, I think we need to look at short snapshot type tracking of trends that we can pick up within a year. So when you look at the beginning and end of the year, that's something, yeah, we don't have a comparable, but we can create a comparable very quickly. And I think similarly, the 9th grade data gives you something that you can grab, not at 12-month intervals, but at 4-month intervals and react to. So a quasi trends.
Thank you. Someone else have something to share?
So one of the things that I noticed, just in terms of trend data, we have kind of comparing our K-5 group from 2019, but it would be nice to kind of, as Martin said, just kind of making maybe smaller groups to compare. So the K-5 over 2019, 2020, 2021, and then when your 6 through 8 comes in next year, then you can have some, I think, smaller groups because your N changes significantly from 2019 to 2020. So just so you're comparing, even though it's slightly different student groups, because they hopefully advanced on, you're still looking at more apples to apples. So, and then also, I have wondered also our district graduation rate, were there any differences between West Side, because it's an alternative high school, versus Wenatchee High School? And also the trend of wondering when Amber had mentioned about a 9th grader getting 2S really kind of sets them up to have a much lower chance of graduating. You know, how much of that is factoring into our dropouts? And who are the other students who are perhaps dropping out as well? So because we see that it's much higher in our Latinx population. So.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? I'm noticing, wondering, trend, or action to share?
We talked a little bit about the male-female trend. It looks like it's just the male dropout rate is disproportionately larger than the female dropout rate. So we kind of talked about why that might be, whether it's engagement, whether it's students feeling like they're able to move on to a skills program maybe earlier, or a technical job earlier in certain areas. So And then we got a little off tangent talking about the article and how it's related to the differences in learning styles. So, but that was the trend we kind of looked at the most.
Okay, well, in closing, we want to thank you all for participating in our data protocol. So data protocols are really a great way to build shared understanding and engagement in the work. And so we really appreciate your time focus on this today. And now I'm going to pass it on to Mike Lane.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. Just real quick side note, the data protocol that we went through that's the kind of conversations we need to be having as professionals, as members of the PLC. That's also an example of an engagement strategy. So that is kind of the second of the 3 SEL signature practices that we want to be seeing in our classrooms and then also in our schools. So just a side note there. Briefly, some of our takeaways, just to make sure that these got brought forward in case they didn't during the course of the conversation. One is just kind of the asterisk that's attached to the fall 2020 data. We did have a dip in fall performance for our struggling students. And number 3 is probably the one that we lose the most sleep about is we do have disparity between our subgroups. That's blatantly obvious, and that's something that we are continuing to work on. And the strategic plan, there's a lot of overlap and alignment between the work we're doing on learning, acceleration, and recovery, and our strategic plan. The strategic plan has strategies that we are hoping will help us on that front. Our students did make growth last year, but we have much more room for growth. We need those spring data to show more green and less red and less yellow. So we have much room for growth. Our students are coming, our elementary students have that strong foundation in phonological awareness, phonics, and high frequency words. And we are starting to close the achievement gap, or the gap between on track for our 9th graders. Maria, that was a great wonder that you had. So we'll be continuing to focus on that. So I appreciate that.
Bust that bubble.
Yeah. So the second component of the learning recovery roadmap was around high quality instruction. So I'll take this one. So using student data, Lexia and iReady are adaptive computer curricular programs that teachers can utilize to help provide some more individualized support for students. And those programs adapt to meet students where they are, and that fall testing that we do is what allows us to accurately place those students in those programs. Additionally, we are seeing this at the elementary school. We're also seeing it at the middle schools that we've been in. Flexible intervention and extension groups. So that's where teachers who are teaching the same subject or the same grade level get together, look at the results. They flexibly group their students based on their needs, and they provide just-in-time intervention and extensions based on that. And then they're able to go back into the program and do check student progress. Additionally, we're using that student data for targeting the focus for our academic support program, our tutoring program. That's what that allowed us to do that. Prioritizing grade level standards and high level instruction. As we've mentioned previously in previous meetings, that prioritizing the grade level standards keeps learning on pace, and that's what actually allows time for PLCs to do some of the intervening. We also have some professional learning opportunities currently happening to address our student performance, particularly the gaps between our subgroups. One is the Math Research PLC that Sarah Wall is leading. That's a district-wide K-12 group of folks who are working with Dr. Andy Boyd, who is a math specialist from North Central PSB, for us to develop our own Wenatchee School District mathematical identity, and then from that, develop a professional development learning plan that will need to arm our staff with a set of guaranteed mathematic routines and skills that we'll be able to see in our classrooms, much like we do with structured literacy, which is also being led by Sarah Wall this time. At the secondary level, we are focused around opportunities to respond. Opportunities to respond refers to the teacher actively engaging and asking for responses from multiple students. So we've all kind of seen the Bueller example where teacher asks a question, nobody raises their hand, and there's just awkward silence until somebody finally speaks up or the teacher just gives the response. That's kind of a non-example of what we want to see. We want to see activities, intentional activities like the turn-in talks that we've been doing today, where every student's voice is in the classroom, they feel engaged, they feel a part of the learning. That's one of the areas we're focused on. In addition to collaborative structures, which is another way of not only staff teaming and the professional learning community's work, but also collaborative structures within the classroom. And again, the data review protocol is another example of that. Teacher collective efficacy is it's an outcome of high functioning teams. Teacher collective efficacy refers to a team's belief in their collective ability to positively impact student learning, including students who are disadvantaged or disengaged. The research behind this comes from John Hattie's seminal book, Visible Learning. And then they reviewed over 1,700 meta-analysis. And remember, a meta-analysis is a study of other studies. So the broad scope of what they looked at was well over 100,000 individual studies involving over 3 million students. And they ranked 252 influences over student learning based on those that actually have a negative impact on student learning, such as ADHD or retention, to ones that have very powerful positive influences over student learning. And the most positive influence over student learning is teacher collective efficacy. And there's an effect size of 1.57, which equates to 4 years of growth. The reason that's important is that as we were reflecting on our student data, some of our students, more than we would hope for, are more than one grade level below where they need to be. So in order for us to get our students where they need to be, we have to be utilizing strategies and processes that will allow multiple years of growth within a single school year. To undertake this, we have a 3-year partnership with Solution Tree. This morning was a 90-minute all-district late start for our students. That means our staff were focused on professional learning. They were focused on this work. The learning and teaching team put together a 2-part presentation. The first part featured videos of Corey and myself kind of laying out from a district-wide perspective. These are our expectations. This is the level of support. This is why we're doing this work. And then the second part of that was really differentiated support at the building level. For principals assessing where their teams are and providing additional time and support for those teams based on their needs. So homework alerts, the work we are engaged in is based largely around a book called Leading PLCs of Work District-Wide from the Boardroom to the Classroom. So in early February, I believe is going to be the date, we will have another board workshop. We will look at winter iReady data, but we'll also get deeper into professional learning communities and collective teacher efficacy. We have books that we will get to you, and what we would ask is that by the time we have that board workshop, that you've read the introduction and the first chapter. So, team, what have I forgotten? That was a lot of me talking. What pieces have I maybe missed on that slide?
Can I ask one question?
Please, please.
Sarah, I'm going to ask it to you. Julie asked this question. So the iReady, the Alexia data, interesting information, but how do teachers over time, what data are they using to really inform themselves from after iReady, Alexia? What do teachers use to make those flexible groupings within their classroom, within their grade level? What are they using to make that next level of information? Because we're not doing iReady every day.
Right, great question. And I'll share my answer and then hand it over to Amber Burks to add on to it. First of all, when we first give the iReady in the fall, as well as in the winter and the spring, we get a great many, very many options in terms of our data. So a teacher can drill down to the specific student and see exactly what that student's deficits are in the entire area of math, right down to the student cannot add 2-digit numbers. And so the data that you saw today is a very high overhead pass, but the teacher gets very specific information to start off the year with their instruction and to form their intervention groups. So that is the data that we really start from, and it's pretty robust. But then in between the fall and winter, as the teacher is providing instruction, we also have common formative assessments in most grade levels and most content areas that teachers are agreeing with their teams to administer. And that's more of the real-time, day-by-day data. So they are quick checks, they are assignments, they are maybe tests or quizzes that they're giving, and that helps to inform day by day and week by week how they can adjust their instruction. Amber, you want to add on to that? Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Just one thing to add to build on what Sarah was saying. So when teachers look at the iReady reports for math, for the online computer adaptive software, and for Lexia, that would be the computer adaptive software we have. That is, every time a student interacts with the software, that augmented reality is generating progress monitoring data. It's real time saying where that student is. So then we, as a big part of our plan, that teachers then are able to take that data and group students, group scholars by skill, by need. And so they use that data for skill grouping. And so, yes, it is a quick check, formative, where's the student right now? Which is the most important data really in a professional learning community. This idea that the formative assessment that's happening every day is what's guiding the instruction, moving away from an over-reliance on just testing 3 times a year, fall, winter, and spring. That's not responsive to students' needs, so, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna pass this to Corey to talk about social emotional learning.
Excellent. Okay, well, there it is. Okay, we are on to our, thank you. We are on to the third step in our learning recovery roadmap here, ensuring all students feel welcome and know that they belong. So we have a variety of things here that I'll be talking about. And I'll start off the first little bit there. And Mike did an excellent job earlier in the slideshow presentation, kind of talking about the why of SEL. And that's very important for us to frame not only the work that we do longitudinally, but most importantly, the work that we do right now and on every day with our students. We know that social emotional learning is more important now than ever. And taking time to honor that work and to honor what the students bring each day. And even further, what our staff bring each day, and us as leaders as well. And I would even say our community and families as well. Everyone needs a little more love and a very intentional time with social emotional learning. So we have some great celebrations in the realm of social emotional learning. I think what we've experienced probably nationally, and I would say worldwide, is just a heightened level of importance and understanding how integral social emotional learning is for everyone. And so from the elementary level, I just kind of wanted to give you some updates on where we are with social emotional learning and kind of the path that we've been on. We're really excited that this year is one of the first years that we can really say that we have consistency in our curriculum, K-5. All teachers are using Sanford Harmony social emotional learning curriculum. Each grade level has 6 different units, pacing calendars, and slide decks that teachers can individualize and buildings can individualize, but the content is the same. So we really get that scope and sequence for every student across the board. So that was really powerful. And there is a lot of flexibility built into the school day so we can make sure we get to that important work. We still do supplement that curriculum because not just one curriculum that is out there and created for our students covers everything that we feel our students necessarily need. So we do bring in some curriculum called Second Step, and we've been using Second Step for a number of years. Together for Youth has partnered with us to make sure that all of our teachers have that curriculum available and in a binder on their shelves. And we've also had a few schools that have started using Purposeful People. And this is a K-5 curriculum. It's also like a building-wide culture and climate curriculum as well. And so we have a few schools that have kind of jumped on Purposeful People and been using that at the building level. They have different characters. This is created by Character Strong, which you're familiar with, that we have at our middle and high school. This curriculum is very specific for building monthly characters and doing some other activities kind of at the building level, but also that trickle down into the classroom. So we're really excited about that. And one of the really great celebration is that we have built in 30 minutes every day of social emotional learning for all of our students in the K-5 level. So they kick off their day with social emotional learning. We're really proud of that. I'm really happy with our building leaders and our teachers that they have taken the time to be very intentional about that on a daily basis. All right, that is our elementary update. Middle school update, social emotional learning. We have all three middle schools are using Character Strong as well. Each school has a little bit different mode of implementation. Sometimes they're shifting the social emotional learning between content areas. So one month it might be English language arts department that is implementing their character development curriculum. The next month it will shift to science. The next month it will shift to math, so that it's just interwoven into the fabric of what they do. And then we have our high schools, both Wenatchee and Westside have Character Strong available for their teachers to access as well. It's a little bit different model. They have the beauty about the curriculum is there's 33 lessons per grade level, so 6 through 12. They all have different lessons that build upon each other. And the idea here is that we don't want redundancy, but there is intentional redundancy when you build on the character traits themselves, because there are some things that are just worth teaching over and over and over again. And so, we really want to make sure that there is not Character Strong fatigue out there, that our students do not get tired of the curriculum, and they've done a really good job about keeping that fresh and unique for our students. In fact, when we went into remote learning, they shifted their entire curriculum, which was really standing deliver curriculum in person. They shifted it to 3 different models. One was a completely remote version, and I'm telling you, it was pretty entertaining, and they had an interactive slide deck that I don't even know how they made that work, but it just did, and it was awesome. Then they had a hybrid version where if you had students that were in person in the day and then maybe remote in the afternoon, you still had curriculum for both. And then they had a strictly in-person curriculum. And the idea here is that we don't want social emotional learning to feel like another class you have to prepare for. We really want this to be available for our teachers to just grab and go and really be in the moment with our students, to be vulnerable, to be transparent, because social emotional learning is as much for the adults as it is for the students. And in order for our adults to really be present and to be available for our students, we need to be taking care of them as much as we do our young students. So that's been really powerful. Westside is using an advisory model to deliver their curriculum. They have Monday grad class time that they use. And Wenatchee High School has the curriculum available for teachers in a variety of ways. There are ways that they can use Character Strong for their inclusive act openers, their engaging strategies, and their optimistic closures as well. And Wenatchee High School is really tracking the use of social emotional strategies through a really cool walkthrough methodology that they're using right now. And they have Ricardo Iniguez is spending most of his days in classrooms really tracking what our teachers are doing in those classrooms, and then helping each of those teachers access high leverage and high result best practices in the classroom, including the social emotional learning. So it's really exciting to see some of this work in action, and then to actually have the data to back it up and say, hey, this is really, really happening in the classroom. So that's been really fun to watch. As far as professional learning, our administrators have been very intentionally trained from learning and teaching perspective for a number of years. Last year, very heavily. We spent a lot of time working with them on the 3 signature strategies that Mike has talked about, and that I'll share a little bit more on in a second here, and you're experiencing today, which is super amazing. And then we also emphasized, again, modeling those, because that's what we're trying to do here at the district level, is really modeling those 3 strategies. Any meeting that the 4 of us have in this room, Sarah, Amber, Mike, and I know Paul is using it, and Ron in his meetings too, is we are all using these strategies to try to model it, to really set the tone for our meetings, and to really get people to be present and in the moment, and try to kind of take and compartmentalize what is happening in our lives and in our world, and Not that we want to distract ourselves from that, but we need to do the hard work. We need to be ready to be able to do that work together. And having an inclusive opener and closing with an optimistic closure, it just really helps set the tone, honestly. So we've been working with that with our administrators for quite some time. And did that again in our administrative advance. And then this Thursday, we have, for this year, is a rare opportunity. We have been engaged in, most of our leadership time has been involved in the PLC at work training and professional learning that Mike talked about a little bit earlier. But we have all of our leaders together on Thursday. And we have a variety of things we're going to do, including covering the reading that Dr. Gordon had us do. But we're also going to just talk about how do we take care of our staff. Again, how do we take care of our staff so that they can take care of our students? It's just a continuation of another challenging year. And we're hearing that the teachers the workload is still intense. The pressure they're feeling from the learning recovery and making sure our students are on track and have what they need, but also attending to the social emotional learning. It's just a lot. And we really want to make sure that our teachers feel that we know that and they feel well cared for, and that we can take that time intentionally to do that. So this Thursday, we're looking forward to that. Our educators, ever since we really embraced PBIS, positive behavioral interventions and supports, social emotional learning has been a piece of that. And so our teachers have gone through a number of trainings. But just most recently, they each had an hour-and-a-half training that myself and Jennifer Devereaux put on in social emotional learning and PBIS in August. We kind of called it a refresh or a reboot. And it really was a refresher for some. And then for others, we had some new to teaching teachers. And so it was kind of, some of them, it was their first glance at what we do at the Wenatchee district and what our expectations are. Our K-5 teachers had in-building level training from the counselors and the coaches in the Harmony curriculum. And then all three middle schools had John Moreland, who is a Wenatchee High School graduate, as you know, Wenatchee boy, co-founder of Character Strong, and he came into all three of their buildings during that August time, spent some time with them. And it was not just, well, anytime you're around John, you leave it, inspired, and you're pumped up, and you're ready to teach anything. Like, I'll go teach a tree right now. I'm just ready. Let's go. But it was also to launch their new, the way that they've revised and refreshed their curriculum. They spent a lot of time with student focus groups to make sure that their curriculum wasn't redundant, wasn't like lame or not engaging. They really wanted to make sure that they had the student voice behind all of that. So that has happened. And then both high schools have had that same Character Strong training in the last 2 years. So our educators are well trained and well prepared. We will continue that moving forward and providing resources to them. Also, we had I had a chance to work with a new group that I haven't worked with yet, 2 new groups actually this year, and train them in PBIS and social emotional learning, our bus drivers. And that was so enlightening. In fact, just trying to prepare myself for the training itself and thinking of what the classroom is for our bus drivers. I mean, it literally is the bus, right? And there's 2 points of contact, hopefully, only 2 points of contact, entry and exit. You never want to have to pull the bus over, or usually if there's communication in the bus, it may not be super good or positive at that point, but it was just great to work with them and to talk through strategies about systemic processes that could help behavior on their buses. And so they've invited me to come back in January. They want to do some work and set up some expectations, like entire bus expectations that are posted, and the same for each of the buses. And then they'll have me come back and we'll work on the next tools. The other group I was able to work with was our after school program professionals. We all got together and talked about PBIS and SEL as well, and got them ready for their classroom. And every classroom looks a little different, so it's super fun. Just spreading the love to more people, and I believe that we'll be having some other opportunities for training with our classified employees and hopefully our custodians as well. Because PBIS really is system-wide, it is school-wide, and those high level expectations that each of our buildings have. Everyone in the building needs to be part of that process and know how all that works. Okay, last little bit there. We've been talking about the 3 signature practices a lot today, which is great. So you kind of know these ideas of inclusive openers. You got to experience one. In education, we used to think of these as entry tasks. These are entry tasks, and historically they have been linked to the content and academics, and that's fine. But what we're doing with social emotional learning is we are saying it doesn't have to always be academics. It can be just getting to know activities or being in the moment or temperature checks. Where are you today? And those sort of things. So we're really opening the door and saying, if you have done entry tasks in the past, here's another way of doing them that could bring more culture and climate to your actual classroom. And the same goes for the engaging strategies. They don't always have to be about the content or what we're working on. They can literally be a brain break. They can be a time to step away from deep learning, just to kind of recharge and refuel. What I'm seeing in my new role this year in elementary schools is there's some cool stuff that they're doing for brain breaks. Like you've been diving into structured literacy for a little while. You need to get some wiggles out, folks. And it's so fun to see what they do in the classroom to get the wiggles out. So, and that allows the brain to be stimulated, get the blood flowing, and then you can really re-engage a little bit better. And then optimistic closures. How do we wrap up the lesson or the thinking for our time together? They used to be known as exit tickets, and a lot of times they were formative assessments on how students understand the content and where they are. And those are still great. We're still encouraging those to happen, but we also are, every once in a while, it's how are you doing? Or how can we end our time together optimistically? So you're excited about the next step. You're excited about what we're going to learn about tomorrow, or you're just excited to get together with these people and this common community for us. Okay. The last bullet here. The final bullet here is a descriptor for the thriving environments section in our strategic plan. So welcoming spaces where all individuals flourish, are seen and valued, feel safe, and know they belong. Okay, which is kind of that entry point into the article that Dr. Gordon asked us to read, what we know about belonging from scientific research. And so I just thought I would just do, instead of doing another think, pair, share, we can do another engaging strategy. And I see that you do this a lot in your board meetings, is just a roll call. And so I thought we'd just call on people and you can share after reading the article what resonated with you and kind of what your thoughts are. And then here's the gift, maybe, depending on how robust of a conversation we have, I may or may not have other questions for us. Just and I do see the time, so I know we got to keep time going. So maybe we'll take a couple of responses. Anyone feel like sharing before we do a roll call?
I just have a quick question. In regards to the 30-minute SEL time.
Yes.
I know there's been a question whether core subject instruction time was being reduced or taken away, impacted to provide SEL.
Right.
Is that the case?
No. No, and in fact, the teaching blocks in the new schedule that they have grown some of those other content areas as well. So there is dramatic, like very large chunks of time for teaching ELA and math, and then the other content areas as well as students rotate to their specialists. So we were very happy that we were able to do that. So thanks for that, Maria.
And I continue, prompted by Maria, also by community input on the 30 minutes in the elementary school. There are people who are early morning people and there are people who are late night people. And we talked about interspersing the 10 spots the day with relaxing and easing up activities. In terms of conserving the best part of the day for the most difficult brain and emotion energy consumers of children, I'll put up an artificial one. Mathematics versus SEL. Why does SEL get the first 30 minutes of the day and are there pluses and minuses?
I'd love to. at least to kind of address what our thinking is behind that. And it goes back to the idea of setting the tone for the day. When students come to us in a school, you don't know what they've experienced that morning. You don't know what they have experienced the night before. You don't know how they slept. Some students don't always wake up in a warm house. Some don't get that breakfast, that we would want them to have. And some don't have the experiences that are really preparing them for diving into academic work right away. And so I think, and that kind of goes along with this article as well, is like, how do we make sure that we are getting our students in the right frame of mind for them to do the learning that needs to happen, that deep learning. And we feel that social emotional learning at the beginning of the day helps our students compartmentalize what their life was before they walked in the door of the school and what their life is like when they come to school in a safe and nurturing environment. So that is our thinking behind that. But that is a great question, because we do want to catch the kids when they're at their best and their peak for learning. So I appreciate that. Absolutely.
Can I jump in on that as well?
Yeah.
Because I agree that the touch point in the morning is really important because of those factors. And I had understood when we were back in hybrid that was about a 15-minute or so allocation. I'm concerned now about spending that entire block of time, and I've heard it's anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, at least in my student conferences. So that's when I start worrying that it is taking away some substantive teaching time. But, and I'm certainly no expert on this, but would it be better to break it up, or is it possible to break it up into chunks to where you can do that maybe 15 minutes and then some other time during the day, if it's that meaningful throughout the day? Because I've heard some feedback from teachers as well, that some would like to get to know their students during the day and kind of address it during the day versus that defined chunk in the morning. And then to the extent it is a defined chunk that we're now kind of almost treating like its own subject, do we have that easily available for parents to review like any other curriculum? So I know I couldn't necessarily find it where we discuss some of our curriculums online, and I know, it's been a topic of conversation in the community. What is this? What is it about? What are they teaching during these times? I have access to that because I have students in classes, so the teachers can tell me this is what we're teaching, but not every member of the community maybe has that same access. So I think it would dispel a lot of issues if we made it more transparent with what that is. But again, going back to the question is, what is the best time, or is there other, I defer to you on what is the best way to do it, but that does concern me, is that we're allocating this whole block first thing in the morning when I think there is some value to that's the best time for some other learning options.
Absolutely. No, I thank you for the question. And the challenge is deeper than always when is the best time, because even that morning section, first off, there'd be some argument is maybe that isn't the best section of time, but I look at it from a social emotional learning and teaching the content perspective, because kids they're taking their backpacks off, they're taking their coats off, the teacher's taking attendance. There's lots of other routines and housekeeping that has to happen in that first 30 minutes. So the battle that I'm having is, even though it's 30 minutes, it's really not 30 minutes. And so I'm like, we need more, honestly. And I think that you're probably hearing the same thing from some of our educators. I want to take the time to get through this 30-minute lesson, and I'm struggling just because we have all of the housekeeping duties and responsibilities that are available there. But it is hard to chunk out the activities because they do go together. They are planned to kind of be this concurrent lesson. We do a meet and greet activity. We talk and we throw out different content areas and subjects. So the teachers are probably not always able to get done what they'd like to do. But that would be from my perspective. It would be really nice to have 30 minutes to actually teach that through. And the curriculum, Julie, thank you for that question. Right now, to see the curriculum, you have to log in and get a username. And so we don't want our parents to have to do that. So we're looking at revamping our social emotional learning page, our website page, just to have the PDFs of that curriculum available. So I've been working with Harmony. The curriculum that we have that is available to us is the last version, but it's still better than nothing. And so until they're literally, Harmony is like, we're not doing PDFs anymore. It's like, I know, I totally understand that, but I don't want to make all of my parents go and get another login and sign up for something just to see your curriculum. And so they understand. So we will be publishing on our website the last version of the curriculum. It hasn't changed much except for some of the activities and transitions. So hopefully that helps. Awesome. Okay, I realize that we are getting down to the wire here. I apologize. Would anyone like to share their thoughts and what resonated with them on the belonging article?
I'll share.
Thanks, Michelle.
You know, just my background in mental health, this was not a surprising article to read for myself. It's good to see that there is research that's saying, yeah, let's take a look at what we know about belonging and what that means in a research lens. But I think we all know that nobody likes feeling left out, right? And that's a sense of not belonging, right? And so when we think about our students, that is important every day for every student. And we probably have a number of students who don't belong for whatever, who feel that sense of not belonging for whatever reason it is, whether they had a bad morning or a poor sleep overnight, or they have other challenges in their life. But I'm really glad that we have social emotional learning to check in with our students, to teach them to recognize feelings, to give them skills that they can move forward. We didn't have it when I came on the board in 2017, so I'm really glad that we're focused on belonging and inclusivity for all of our students in our district, because I think that will, again, if you feel like you have a sense of belonging, you're going to interact more, you're going to share more in your class, you're going to get more out of your education. And that's what we want for our students. We want them to be able to translate that feeling included to a sense of accomplishment academically, so that they can go on and choose to do whatever they maybe are building. So I just really appreciate the article. Thank you for sharing it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else want to? Brian, time for one other person if you want to go?
I'll go. Again, this is not a surprise. It's something actually that I've shared with Paul before. I think in general, kids, especially kids this generation versus say my generation or Paul's generation, it's a different world. And so that insecurity in general, sorry, Paul. In general, kids carry those insecurities. Am I wearing the right shoes? Is it the right brand? Then when you add the layers of, say, gender identity, the stereotypes of race, the economic status, it's just, and some of our students carry all of those. And so when you compile all of those, I guess, insecurities or sense of belonging, they're just, they're deeper and deeper, and it's harder for them, to come up and feel included. One of the things about the effective programs, what immediately came to mind was Avid. All of the work and that our Avid instructors and the program are doing, that's exactly, I think, that what this program is designed to do. But unfortunately, not all of our students get the services, right? Again, and then I also have here SEL, worry about whether people like them are accepted by their peers and their teachers. It's on two levels. So peers, and then the acceptance and getting rid of those stereotypes from both peers and the big people. So again, not a surprise. Like, oh yeah, for me reading it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. It really does. I really feel like this article helps us understand so much about our students and what they go through. And I would argue after reading this, there isn't any student in our schools that don't at some point wonder and wonder about their belonging and acceptance. And it really doesn't matter who you are or your background. We all deal with those things. I mean, that's it. Middle school's awkward, right? Come on, let's just talk about this. But no, and so that really helped with this article. So thank you for taking time. Paul, we have not fully unpacked this, so if you want to use it later on for other conversations, I think that would be great. But I need to talk about mental health at this point. So as we look to our next, the next part of the roadmap, key steps, we can see that focusing on mental health in the community, connections and resources. So I'll go through the slide fairly quickly, but we are super excited to have 2 full-time social workers at the secondary level at the high school. Also will, these 2 have spent time in our middle schools as well and have bridged to West Side on a variety of situations. So it's really great to have Bob and Sarah at the high school level. And there were some funding issues and kind of how we were going to support these social workers, and we found a way to be committed and solid about that work. And our MTSS coaches at the middle level are working together collaboratively with counselors and teacher teams and family advocates to ensure support for our students. And then we have our SSS positions, our social service specialists at the elementary level, full-time in each building, which is great. So I think that the main component of this slide here is the sheer number and level of compassionate and caring adults that we have in our system, looking out for the mental health and emotional well-being of our students is increasing. And the collaboration with these folks and our other team members, graduation specialists, attendance advocates, our counselors who do the heavy lifting in a lot of ways, they're all working in conjunction to help our students be successful and find that success. And then what we're doing at the district level, the Well-Being Project, I'm so proud of our district last year with the pandemic brainchild learning and teaching to really partner with our community and our healthcare and the number of agencies out in our valley that support our students as we're wading through the pandemic together to bring information and resources. So we had last year we had guest speakers and YouTube playlists, and we're doing the same thing this year as well. We're highlighting a SEL podcast for our teachers to listen to. We're sending, redirecting our staff member, community members, and students to the Wellbeing YouTube playlist, which has a great resource of videos. And then we're bringing in resources for our students, staff, and families. Right now, we're working with a couple from the Seattle area that partner with the University of Washington to do some pandemic parenting conversations with us, and then working with our staff just on kind of working through the stress of the pandemic in a teaching environment. So we're really excited about this work. And want to go through that super quickly, but pay attention to it so we can get to the 5th step, which is our tutoring with all of our schools.
Yeah, so just a reminder around our additional academic support plan. We are doing this in partnership with our 21st Century Community Learning Centers, our after-school program, for an influx of CARES funds to allow us to expand the work. Huge shout out to our building leaders and our staff who were able to wrap around the student data, what resources we were able to provide them, and then create these programs. We now currently have extended day support at all of our schools. For the K-1 level, we relied on the expertise of our teachers. And the path we went down for K-1 is what we're calling Hour of Power. And Amber Burks is working with 2 of our K-1 teachers in the district to create resources for families to access for easy kind of play-based strategies for them to be reinforcing literacy and math skills at home, rather than trying to extend the school day for our K-1 kiddos or give them additional work to do. So that's the opportunity that we have for our K-1 students. For 2 through 5, all our schools operate that after-school academic support. Middle school is actually a combination of before and after school because they start a little bit later. But Sometimes they are finding that their staff and their students actually are better situated in the morning to be doing some of this work. And then 9 high schools providing that after-school support. Our goal from the very outset was to be utilizing our own teachers and our own paraprofessionals to support the teachers' work, and we were able to do that. So that is going on. We are proud of that. In addition to that, we have built, and when I say we, I mean Diana and Ron, have built out academic support component to our webpage where all of this information and resources are housed. And that also is where they have the free online resources. So oftentimes, especially at the secondary level or at the high school level, you're getting up into some of the higher level math classes and students are needing help. It's kind of a struggle to find people who are actually qualified other than the teacher themselves to provide that help. So we have multiple options that they can access online from home to get that level of support. So Corey, what about you? You forgot about that.
You did a great job. I think one of the things that we had to work hard on was getting the different programs to just work in their own setting. So like we have, each of the middle schools have their own program that works for their students, their staff, their building. We kind of had the same thing that happened at the elementary schools as well. And so each building kind of came up with a formula and a program that works for their specific students and their staff. So they're very grassroots in the way that they work at the building levels. And one of the things I think that is exciting, and again, Mike did the shout out to the building leaders and the staff, is just their readiness for the students to benefit from this process and this the program. We obviously wish they were a little bit more robust in some areas, but we're very excited about the work that was being done. And we had adults that were just, at first, were like, I don't know if I can take on a whole lot more. And then they just had people that stepped right up to the table. So we're very proud of our programs in our schools.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So for clarification, are we doing or referring anyone to any kind of external tutoring resource, or is it all with our own staff?
Say it again, I'm sorry.
Are we using any external tutoring resources, or is it all within?
For the in-person extended day stuff, that's all our own staff. On the website, that's what I was trying to articulate, is that we are directing people to other resources. They're not necessarily a tutor showing up at your house, but they're more online resources that we're taking advantage of.
And are those offered free to families
Yeah.
through our funding?
Yeah.
And then through that little hour of power, you mentioned that primarily sounds like something that needs to be done at home to have mechanisms for families that really struggle with doing anything at home.
Support for the families.
Right, that's what I mean.
That's what the entire program is intended to be. So for example, Amber, do you want to talk a little bit more about it? Amber has been instrumental in helping create this with a couple of our kinder and first grade teachers. The idea is that many parents know and want to help their students and support the work going on in school. They don't know how to do that. So that's what this is opportunities, strategies, things that they can be doing with their students to support that. So Amber.
It's an online component. They can just jump in using their phone or a computer at home, but there's a read aloud and then there's interactive play around the literacy factors that have a great impact on student learning. So if letter sound fluency is one of them, it's teaching families how to do that in a fun way. So what's the first sound you hear in car? Is the first sound I hear in car. So being able to have play back and forth, but also show families how to do the evidence-based instruction. That's the idea. So there's it's sort of coaching families at home for how to support. Okay, was that helpful?
It's helpful, but I think I'm still worried about the families that maybe don't have that kind of support at home. The parents that don't have the time to work through that with the students or the means or just other dynamics. So I was just wondering if we're accommodating that some way.
I think the best accommodation that we are providing the multiple tiers of support during the school day. So students who do need those interventions are receiving those interventions during the school time. And that's part of the greatest equity work we're doing, the multiple tiers, tier 1, and then additionally, if once students we know they're behind, we're making sure that they're getting some interventions or extensions within their school day. That's the true equity ensuring for all students. And then the after school is just one more effort to hopefully capture more families and students that we could reach.
Can I push a little bit further in that same area? Because I think it's really a tough thing to do, but a really, really important thing to do for the K1 hour. So my first question, to what extent is this totally bilingual materials that you're providing?
Yes, we have, one teacher is doing English side, and then the second is doing the Spanish side.
Because the other angle that I think would be, this is, I'm gonna say it anyway. I think families have different abilities and resources in the household in a variety of ways. So I think it's a real challenge, and it should be top, front and center in developing a program that it works for Julie's struggling families. And I just want to, I know it's really, really tough to encourage you. And then just one little thought that struck me, you said it was internet and cell phone. I've heard a lot of talk about a lot of families work much better with paper. That's something in pencil or anything like that. So not so much asking the question, but an encouragement to make sure that covers as wide a range of needs as possible.
Well, yes, thank you so much for that feedback.
Excellent. And I just want to thank. Go ahead.
I thought you were done.
Well, as much as everyone would like it.
I know we've got a couple board members there, but we need to go to.
Okay, so we literally, then this can just be a thinking piece, and so I apologize that we're over. Covered a lot today, and I just want to say thank you to all the board members and everybody and our learning improvement team and cabinet members. But just for you to leave today, think about something that you heard today that is a positive takeaway that you would like, well, we're not going to share, but just think about that, to honor the work that's gone into this year and our learning recovery model and the lift from our district. And then that's it.
No, I apologize. I just know Maria's already to go. Yeah, she's trying to get back to work. I'll answer that. Just honoring the work that our learning and teaching team did. Sarah, Amber, Corey, led by Mike, to put this on. It was a lot of information just to go through the academic recovery and acceleration plan as one of the asks by the board to make sure that we had the data, but also to walk through the plan itself. As Mike alluded to, in February, we're going to come back to the board in a workshop with that fall winter data. And then we heard from a couple people breaking down that data a little bit more, and that maybe that K2, 3, 5. So we have that data disaggregated. But I wanted to honor the work of our for learning and teaching and others within the department for leading today's workshop. Board, I appreciate it. Martin, back to you.
Yeah, I want to make a thank you, everybody, for the intensity and dedication that you showed. You have to move fast and dedicatedly, and it really showed as a workshop with a lot of faith in it. Thank you. A lot of challenges coming forward. And as far as finishing 9 minutes late, I'm happy to pocket the gavel. So thank you very much.
All right. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ron, for taking that on. I got a little breakfast with you.
Yeah, that's some time.
Hopefully